All right, we are at the top of the hour. Hello, everyone. My name is Colin Brown, and I'm with NACVA and the Consultants Training Institute. We want to welcome each of you to our webinar today. Before we begin today, we'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. The first is how to earn CPE credit. To obtain CPE credit for this webinar, you'll need to answer all the poll questions that will pop up on your screen at random times throughout the session. You are required to answer all questions to verify your attendance in compliance with the standards of NASBA. Now, if you have attended this course, like we had it run, I believe, last week, and you can only get CPE credit for one time. So just be aware of that. You can't, if you've already gotten it, then you won't be able to get it for today's. And of course, 7 to 10 business days after the webinar, and right now it's actually more than that. We have so many people who have attended all these free CPE webinars that we are backlogged for some time. We've got at least 5, if you can believe it, 5,000 CPE certificates that have to be created. But you'll be able to, if you wait, maybe 2 weeks or so, you'll be able to access and print your CPE certificates by logging into the member portal on nacva.com. And CPE credit will not be issued to attendees who do not complete the required poll questions. If you have any questions during today's webinar, you'll be able to submit those questions into the Q&A section of your Zoom toolbar. And please use the Q&A option for relevant questions for instructors. If you have a generic comment or a technical question or a poll question, you can use a chat feature for those. And there are a lot of people on today's webinar, so we'll respond as quickly as possible. And it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter today, Dave Miles. Dave Miles is the Business Valuation Manager at ValuSource for the last 15 years. His duties include testing and publishing the data for the Institute of IBA and BizComp's databases. Grateful to be a part of the amazing valuation community. He has spoken with thousands of evaluators, helping them accomplish their goals and learning from them. Prior to joining ValuSource, Mr. Miles is the CFO of an $80 million financial institution. He considers himself a great husband to his wife of 31 years and a great father to 2 bright and capable kids. So with that, I will turn the time over to Dave.
You bet. Thank you so much, Colin, for that. Perhaps I think my bio is a little bit dated. I'm going to have to work with you next time when we do one of these and update that bio. I want you to make a note. dmiles@valuesource.com, pretty easy to get to. If you need anything after this webinar, feel free to reach out to me. I like talking about this stuff, and I certainly am available to handle any questions that might come up, questions that you think about, stuff like that. Also, today's materials is just a little Word document, and it is available on the portal. You can download it from the portal, but if you can't get that, feel free to email me and I will make sure you get a copy of this particular presentation. So let's go ahead and get started here. One of the items I want to ask you is, another thing is during the presentation, I like a couple of things. The first thing is the Q&A panel and the chat panel. I get to run that today, so feel free to type in your stuff. You have a question, you have a comment, you want other people to know about. One of the nice things that I'm trying to do with these Zoom meetings is to make sure that, it's more like a room full of people. And usually when there's a room full of people, somebody has something that's relevant to say inside of the presentation, and they can do stuff. So somebody's asking us to please raise the volume. I'm getting one person. That's as much as I can go on the volume. So if you are having more problems, Peggy, feel free to drop out. Feel free to try to turn up your side of it. So type into the Q&A any questions you have. Type into the chat panel things that are coming up. Like I say, people have a lot of input in this particular area. This whole COVID-19 situation is causing a lot of grief for everyone, and so this particular session, I'm trying to say what are some of the things that we can do on the practice side of things to do that. And so a myth I think out there is not really a myth. Everybody knows this, but valuation is one market space, and the answer is that every time I talk to practitioners, they are doing many different types of things. Some are doing IRS type work, some are doing M&A work, some are doing insurance insurance work, some are doing sales, some are doing litigation in the family practice area, and there's a lot that goes on in all of that. And each one of those places have a okay, Lori says the portal states there's no course materials at this, but there's a link in the upper right corner, not just under the heading of the course materials. And that would be true. I gave them the course materials, about 45 minutes ago. So, NACVA is doing all that they can do to help. As I said, if you can't find them, feel free to email me. Thanks, Lori. I appreciate that. So anyway, I'm trying to say there's a lot of different reasons people do the valuation work, and we can add in forensic work inside of this as well. Just because I'm talking about it in an evaluation sense doesn't mean that a lot of the databases, a lot of the different areas that we're looking at today can't be used for forensic work as well. And another question. It says, can you expand on the term IRS valuation? The answer is yes. There's gift tax work and there's estate work. And I realize that I'm going to kind of punch my balloon out here in another slide, but what I have found is that some of the people that are doing the IRS estate work have gotten out of business. The estate planning, or not the estate planning, but the actual, here's the death taxes part, there's a business involved in that, has kind of dried up a little bit, maybe as much as 25 to 50%. Those are my opinions. That's what I've heard. Now, I don't know of anybody that's done a study on that, but a lot of the practitioners I know that were doing that estate work have gone out of business. Now, they might come back into business with this whole COVID-19, their skills are still pretty fresh and they can come back into it. But they had decided that they didn't want to practice anymore because of, the work just wasn't there. The other thing you can get into is into the gift area. And the last I had heard with the new estate rules was that, instead of passing things down to the children and to the grandchildren, they're starting to pass things up. So they would take the shares from the children and grandchildren and do a gifting upwards into the the great grandparents, so that when the grandparents died, the estate would be holding those and there would be no taxes on it. So it just depends on how people are trying to do that work. There's also trusts involved in the IRS valuation work that would come into play there as well. And I'll contrast that with the other side of things. You got SBA lending out there. A few people I've talked to are trying to start up their practices and gear up, and they're getting into this SBA lending. This whole COVID-19 is throwing a whole loop-de-loo inside of that particular practice as well, because some of the 7A lending and stuff, they're all going to be dealing with the PPP loans, not necessarily with the the 7A loans. But the thing I find with the SBA lending is that this here is a grind. You have to get out there, you have to get into the data quickly, you have to generate a report quickly, and you get it out the door quickly, as well as you don't have a lot of fees that you can generate from that. You still have to do quality work, mind you, but you don't have a lot of ability to generate fees because they're just looking for that compliance, if you will, with that. And so there's a contrast to that side of it. And obviously, litigation is always litigation. It's always expensive for everyone. And if you can get into that work, you should do it. It's awesome stuff. I also need to say that these are my opinions. You're welcome to disagree with them. You're welcome to debate them. Hopefully what we come up with at the end of the day is some ideas for you to take back to your practice. And you can say, hey, maybe we should take a look at this. I'll tell you why I hold these opinions. If I don't tell you why, I gave you my email address. It's pretty easy to find me. You can call up NACFA, you can call up ValuSource and say, I need to talk to Dave, and they'll be happy to push you over there. I don't know if you all have any ideas here on how the world is changing because of COVID-19, but you're welcome to type those into the Q&A panel or the chat panel as well. And one thing I wanted to say is that COVID-19 is having an effect on us. So as we start to put together our valuations, no matter what, we have a subsequent event of COVID-19. I shouldn't say no matter what. I'm looking at December 31st, March 31st, and let's look into the future. If you're doing something next December, how is COVID going to affect things then? And I believe that a lot of people are concerned that there's going to be extra work, extra hours involved. Now, if there's extra hours involved, what does that do to your realization rate? And that's kind of what I wanted to bring into play here and say, you know, COVID-19, yes, there's a whole bunch of webinars on saying how to, what are the nuts and bolts, how do we bolt packages on, how do we take care of these issues inside of the valuation. But you also have a problem inside of your practice, and that is how am I going to continue to make money, even though I may have to put more hours into a valuation? Will I be able to charge for those hours? You know, it's a big question, and hopefully we can come up with some ideas today that, well, they're not going to replace that. They might help that, I guess is a way to put that. So I put this up here and said, you know, if I use software, my expertise is subrogated, and if I use software, I cannot express my own opinion. And I started to think about this after we did the session last week. And I think I'm answering a question from 20 years ago. And that question was, is that, you know, hey, if it's black box, then I am not using my opinion. And here's what happened 20 years ago is that a partner got up on the stand, and, you know, the judge asked him, or the litigators asked him, you know, how did you calculate this number? And the partner said, I don't know, the software did it. Well, as soon as you go to that level, you're saying, hey, I didn't really do this work myself. And if you didn't do that work yourself, obviously you're having a, you know, bad work product. And that's it. And I think that the problem that we have today is not so much that situation, it's the other situation that people are so used to apps and other things that they just say, oh, let me try this app, I put that information in, I'm sure the inputs are okay, you know, so the value must be right. And they're not really double checking the work inside of the software. That might be the other issue that's going on today, is too much reliance on an app. I have a question here from, I'm not sure how to say the name, Ad. And it says, can you use knowledge of COVID-19 of today for evaluation with an effective date of 12/31/19? And you know, the whole answer is it depends. Are we talking about, you know, litigation? Are we talking about IRS? Are we talking about other things? And it all depends on the use of that report. If you give somebody a report that says the value of this company was X number of dollars on 12/31/19, and you don't discuss COVID-19, even though your report date has, you know, affected that, I think that you're probably doing a disservice to your client. Does that mean that you can change the value as of 12/31/19? I'm not sure you can do that, but I do think that you might have some subsequent events inside of your report. There are a ton of webinars that are out there right now that discuss this whole issue. And, you know, there are a lot of different known or knowable issues that you have to put into place, as well as the how-tos. Somebody out here is saying, Patrick is saying, you know, COVID-19 effect, the NACPA panelists were emphatically unanimous about business increasing greatly. But I think cash will be more and more scarce, and there will be less opportunities. Great comment, Patrick. I don't have anything to put onto that particular comment, but thank you so much for putting that out there. Back to my reality, good work is good work. So if you can find a tool, or you can find a product, or you can find a set of an aggregation of ideas, an aggregation of resources, I guess is a way to say that, and you can use those to your benefit, I think that you'll start to manage your practice a little bit better, or manage your work a little bit better. But that doesn't mean that good work can be forgotten. You still have to make sure you put in the time and the effort, the quality, the competency, the ability to reproduce these items, and items like that. I believe that quality control is known as standardization. That's what I call it in the computer world. As I said, one of my ideas in the computer world was to make sure that you know, the marketplace and the computer programmers had a link between the two. I have a comment out here from Carrie. She says, or it could be a guy, I guess it's one of those names. I apologize. From Carrie, while I know that our evaluations are to be prepared using all of the information that is known and knowable at the valuation date, and may include a subsequent events note, but in general, we are estimating the value as the present value of future earnings. How do you reconcile the idea that such a dramatic event shouldn't be factored into the value that might be a date before COVID? That's a great comment. As I said, it's kind of outside of the scope of this webinar. There are lots of webinars out there to deal with that sort of question and that issue. Ultimately, though, I will say this, ultimately, your name is on that report, and your the quality of work that you're prepared to stand behind is on that report as well. So make sure that you have that question answered in your own mind before you go too far forward. And too far forward is if you issue the report. So I'm under the idea of quality control. I call it standardization. Standardization says, do I start from the same place every single time, and do I adjust accordingly? I know some experts out there that charge $500 an hour, and they start with a blank spreadsheet and a blank document every time they do an engagement. And their idea, simply, they look me in the eye and they say, Dave, here's the deal. If I'm charging myself out at a high hourly rate as an expert, then they deserve the quality that comes with that. And part of that quality is that every engagement is unique and what I want to say, it's unique to that set of circumstances and that fact pattern. And that's what you know, the lawyers that hire them are hiring them for. And they're saying, look, this here is a unique situation. These guys here have, you know, high level of competencies. I also know that there's the other side of that, where I was talking about the SBA stuff. You know, if you template that, you know, you can push those out in a fairly decent fashion. And it's a grind, I give you that, it's a grind, but you can push that out in a fairly decent fashion, and you haven't compromised yourself on the standards, it's all. Efficiency. I also think of efficiency as automation. Obviously, computers automate things, and we automate things at a whole bunch of different levels, and hopefully I can show you a whole bunch of examples of how that automation is. And when I talk about this quality control and automation, I am going to talk about it in terms of the databases that are available through KeyValueData.com, and I'm also going to talk to you about it in terms of the software that we publish, Business Valuation Manager Pro. But you need to know that that software, everything that we do inside of that software can also be done inside of just Microsoft Office, whichever version you particularly use. So if you want to have templates inside of Microsoft Office, you can create your own templates. If you want to have automation inside of Microsoft Office, you can have automation inside of Microsoft Office. I thought there was a polling question on this here particular channel, but there's not. I think the biggest mistake most experts make is copy and paste. It's not the most prevalent theoretical mistake, which has to do with matching benefit streams and discount rates, but I do think it's the biggest mistake. And almost everybody I've talked to has made a copy and paste error sometime during their career. Sometimes it's embarrassing, sometimes it's not so embarrassing. But yes, something got out of the office door with the wrong copy and paste inside of it. And so that's why I want to talk to you about some of these tools. This particular screen or document is talking about the idea of saying, when you talk about your tools and your data, have you given proper consideration to the packages that are available? And the packages that are available are, and I have a comment here from Jim saying he's not seeing the polling questions. So I have to be clear here. I'm going to ask some questions about some stuff, and I thought I was asking a question that you need to type into the chat panel, and then you know, Colin is issuing the attendance polling questions. Those attendance polling questions, and the first one just came up, you need to answer to get the continuing education credits, you know, on that certificate. My polling questions are just to engage you in the discussion here today. And so, you know, like I say, we're coming up on one here. And so let me see if I can go to the next page. Oh, it's not even there. Awesome. I don't know how my slides are working today. Anyway, I want to get to the point of saying, you know, after completing this webinar, you should be able to talk about establishing quality control over your work product. How do I standardize that work product? You know, is it really, am I starting from a blank sheet? And if I'm starting from a blank sheet, then what quality control issues do I have on the back end of that to make sure that there's no mistakes in it? We've all seen the articles. We've all seen the publications. Hey, if you build your own Excel spreadsheet, it will probably have an error in it somewhere. And the question is, when do you find it and how do you find it? Realize efficiency and time savings through tools like software and analyzer tools. Again, when you start doing that, you have to make sure that you got good quality work, but you can realize efficiency and time savings. And then we're going to look at the different database levels, and we're going to look at the different analyzer tools. Now, I am going to tell you what the pricing is on these databases. Realize that I'm not trying to step up here and sell you something today. All I'm trying to do is that we are trying to show you what that value proposition is. So I have a comment here from Lori Maston. She says, Carrie, great question, and one we are all likely grappling with. In general, we need to focus on the purpose and our standards and indicate if that opinion is relevant to the user after the valuation date. Then consideration should be given to disclosing a subsequent event. They are silent as to incorporating the event into our analysis. Enough said. So one of the things that I like to do is I like to bring the history of the different products, the history of the different valuation stuff. As I said, I've been around for 20 years, seen a lot of different things. You know, I can remember when we used the SBBI Classic Edition, which basically only had, you know, a 10th decile, did not have any valuation information inside of it. As far as, you know, here's the different industry risk premiums, here's the valuation edition of the workbook. They hadn't gone into some of those beta conditions. They just took the 10 deciles and laid it out and said, here's your history on it. If you're a member of NACVA, you have a subscription level already. It is called Econ Assist. And Econ Assist is what I like to call not necessarily primary information, but secondary information to run your practice and run your valuation and forensic work with. We have a webinar coming up on June 4th. If you don't know what that is, feel free to you know, pick up that webinar. And also, if you log into your portal, you can go out to the KeyValueData Econ Assist and you can get information out there. One of the conference presentations back in 2018 was presented by Chris Mercer, and he said, our profession in transition. And he talked about the history of our stuff. And back in the 70s, when he was getting into valuation work, you know, he basically had a book. He would look up some comparable transactions and come up with a value. The income method had not really had a lot of as much detail as we have today, let's put it that way. And so he says, also I was in attendance at that particular thing, and he said, we have a lot of the same issues back in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s as we do today. And that's ironic, because I think, you know, we might get better at some of those things, but we haven't. Anyway, I believe that, you know, our industry is being codified and standardized, and because of that, there's going to be a lot of downward pressure on the engagement price. Still a place for us, but I think that there's going to be a lot of pressure on our engagement price. And the COVID-19 is also going to put more pressure on that, because I think we're going to have to put more hours into evaluation. And I don't know if you'll be able to pass that off on to the client. Here's my polling question that I keep asking about. Do you use VBA or some other programming in your spreadsheets? And if you could type into the chat panel, you know, you don't have to do it to just us. I think you can chat to the whole group. You can put that out there. And, you know, what I'm trying to get at here is how many people are using automation already? If you're putting together practices in valuation work and you're not using automation, I think you're missing the boat. You need to automate certain functions that are repetitive, certain functions that, you know, are done every time in the same way. And if you can use VBA for that, one of those items would be is if I download data. So for instance, I know people that use Capital IQ, and they have built that into their spreadsheet templates. And so, you know, when they want that data, they push that in there. I know Duff & Phelps has a download tool that will help bring in that data from them automatically. And so, you know, if you're using those kinds of tools and you're using copy and paste functions, you can automate that stuff. And so I'm getting a whole bunch of different answers, you know, not currently, yes. Here's my favorite one. What does VBA mean? VBA is the Visual Basic code that goes into Microsoft. So when you write a macro on a spreadsheet, you're using VBA code. Great question though, great comment. And then in the chat box, I'm seeing a whole bunch of questions out here. Yes, no, yes, no. I'm guessing that it's about 50-50. The last time I had pulled up this as a polling question itself, it came up to be about 50-50. 50% are using some form of automation and 50% are not. This person out here, Danielle Stein Firehurst, has a whole bunch of information about financial modeling. She has a newsletter she puts out. She does books, podcasts, and training. It's kind of interesting to see what other people are doing in the world of financial analysis and financial modeling with with Excel and Office. And, so if we know all of this, what are we going to do about it? Well, you can get out of the business. Some people did when the state rules changed, or we can adjust. And the question is how do you want to adjust? And here again, if you have ideas that I'm not representing here, or you think the group should know about, feel free to type those into the chat panel, in the Q&A panel, and we can go from there. But I think you have to look at, how do I automate my repetitive tasks? How do I standardize to eliminate waste and increase quality control? An example of this would be do you take your worksheets and do you protect all of the calculations except for the input cells? Do you classify or do you code the input cells with a special color? Is there a way to say, okay, if I pass this off to a junior or somebody who's working for me or somebody who works with me, do we know what's going on inside of this so we're not changing the calculations very much? And then the last question is how do you reduce costs? Obviously, if you reduce costs on this line of business, you're in better shape. And so let's talk about some of those items. I think that when we're talking about the cost of data, we can say, is this important to you? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. And I think that has a lot to do with what line, is that the right way to say that? It has to do with the way you practice valuation work. If you're dealing with banks and you're out there and you're trying to say, let me templatize this and let me get your compliance data quickly and fast, obviously the cost of your data is going to be really important to you. If you're a litigator, perhaps the cost of data is not as important as being, more complete. And so you have to look at that. I also think that how many engagements you do in a year is important. And so I tend to find that there's a few groups of people. One of those groups is that people will tend to do, I don't know, somewhere around 3 to 6 of these. They tend to have clients. They need to do the valuation work for them, probably gifting. And so they don't want those clients to go to a larger firm. And so they do the work. And they tend to do 3 to 6 of these a year. So that's a lot different practice than somebody who's full-time and can do, 200 of these in a year, as opposed to a standalone practice that might do 20 or 30 of these a year. It all depends on how you practice this. And if that's the case, then we need to look at what kind of costs there are involved inside of this. In the early 2000s, when I first started in this realm, I would tell a practitioner, it's going to take you around $5,000 to get into this particular business. And as you get into this particular business, what's going to happen is that you're going to have to buy databases, and those databases, include discount rate databases, comparable transaction databases. You're going to have to buy some data that does, peer group comparisons. And by the time you get all done with that, it's going to be upwards of $5,000. Today, I think you can do it for around $1,000. And one of the ways that I see that happening is through the different levels, the different bundles that are available through KeyValueData. Again, I'm not trying to sell this to you. I am just trying to show you here's an option that's out there. And unfortunately, I'm not sure a lot of people understand all of the options that are available to them. So if you start to look at some of these different bundles, we have silver, we have gold, and I'm sorry about my scrolling. I'm learning how to scroll this new way, and it's difficult for me. We have silver, we have gold, we have platinum, we have titanium. You can tell that silver, we have 7 and 3 downloads. Downloads is when you press the Excel button and you get data out. So we have comparison databases, comparable sales databases, ValuSource market comps, formerly IBA, BizComps is inside of here. You can get to your Duff & Phelps cost of capital. In the gold platform, you can get to IRS corporate ratios. And as you come down here to the bottom, you can start to see that there's different pricing on this. The gold level's about $800. And then I would suggest you look at BizMiner or First Research. Now, if you're doing 1 to 6 of these a year, it probably makes sense to buy an individual report for each one that you're doing. If you start to do more than that, probably makes sense to buy a suite or a package that you can get out there and get that information. That's going to give you your industry data. That's going to give you your peer group comparison numbers. And so now for around $1,000, you're in pretty good shape, and you can see the value proposition on there. So Jeff out there, says for newbies, the cost of data is secondary to the time and money required for the appropriate professional certifications, ABV, CVA, ASA, etc. Great lead into my next point. And I agree with you, Jeff. I think that getting the right training and being able to be an expert in this field is super important. But as I come up here and I start to look at some of these databases, you know what I mean? And as we look over here, okay, ValueSource market comps, ValueSource M&A comps, public company data. That's the data you need to do a good quality job. Now the question is what is sufficient and competent and relevant data to your work and to your opinion? And you have to make that choice. I've heard Shannon Pratt say the IBA market data set is unreliable. You know what I mean? I don't believe that. Today, it's not true. But a lot of people might, if you think that, then obviously this package doesn't mean anything. Other people might say, hey, I have to have deal stats. Well, deal stats is a great database. And if you're looking at super small companies, they have data in there. What I'm trying to tell you is do you have to have all of them? Do you have to have deal stats? Do you have to have biz comps? Do you have to have ValueSource market comps? Or is it like the initials after your name? You take the same test 7 times. Yes, they have different information in them. Yes, there's only about a 10 or 20% overlap. But at the end of the day, they all tend to have the same types of problems, and they tend to have the same type of data. And you know what I mean? You need to look at that and decide for yourself what is sufficient, competent, reliable evidence for my reports. And like I say, if you're trying to keep saying, like I say, if you look at the value proposition that's down there, $800 for a complete set of data as opposed to $800 for one set of data, that could be a difference for you. Anyway, I have the link inside of the document. You're welcome to come out and look at these different bundles. If you'd like to talk about any of these particular databases, I'm sure that I've done a webinar or 2 on them I can guide you to. Also be happy to talk to you about them, just straight up and say, here's what's inside of here, here's what's not inside of here, and move on from there. So let's talk about data. So as we talk about data tools, what I really want to try to present to you is that there's repetitive tasks of trying to get the data out. And then there are analyzer tools that help you analyze that data. Now, the way you get data out and the way you analyze data is that expertise that you have to bring to the scenario here. If I could automate this stuff and say, oh, give me the name of your company, tell me the product it sells, tell me what geographic region you're in, and tell me the size of this company. You know what I mean? And I could generate a value from that, ValueSource would be doing it. But we can't. There are too many facts and circumstances that go into valuing a company besides just those criteria. And so you have to look at what are the competitive advantages inside of a business, what are the disadvantages of that particular business, how does it work in the marketplace? My favorite example, and I'm getting a little off topic here, but I got an extra minute, is I come from Pueblo West, Colorado, and inside of there, actually I've lived in Pueblo West for the last 20 years. Before that, it was in Castle Rock, Colorado. So if I look at Pueblo, on the north side, it's the brand new side. It's where all the new homes are being built. It's where the new growth is at. And so if I had a pizza pie place there, they probably would be upper scale. And as they had upper scale, brand new, clean places, no problems. On the south side of town is where the old steel mill was. And inside of there, they've been around since, the 1900s. And there are pizza places down there that have had 60 years of stuff. Now, I'm not saying that they do, but I'm not saying that they do, but if they were to have, a high volume of health citations, you know what I mean? They have a problem getting things clean. Let's say that, the customer base is just the traditional folks that are out there. Those two shops, while they might make the same amount of revenue, and while they are both in the pizza pie place in the business, those are two different businesses. And one has a competitive advantage over the other. And the north side would probably be worth more money than the south side. Just saying that. You can't just take those items and put it together. And so I have a question here. It says, are those data presented mainly America-centric? And the answer is yes. Yes, they are. There are some Canadian companies inside of our comparable databases. There are some, I haven't seen any European companies inside of there. Inside of our peer group analysis, we use the IRS data to create some peer group ratios, and that is all based off of tax returns filed in the United States. We have the Risk Management Association data. They are trying to expand out to the international market. As they expand out into the market, we might see some information from overseas, but I'm not seeing it. So it's mostly America-centric. The nice thing about that is that when I talk to the international evaluators that are out there, they tend to look at America as a benchmark. I don't want to say that they use American data, but they will look at it as a benchmark and say, where am I based off of that? Just my particular viewpoint on that, or my take on it. Kathy out there says, for those who are new to using ValueSource, downloads are not just data, they include analysis tools to help you apply the information properly. I found this to be both a great time saver, as well as giving me some assurance I'm not misinterpreting how to apply the comparative data. Well, Kathy, thank you for the recommendation there. Testimonial, that's the word I'm looking for. That's what I'm going to talk about over the next 5 minutes here, and say, yes, we do that, but make sure that you apply your expertise. Make sure that you apply your expertise in that. So yes, we have analyzer tools, and as those tools do stuff, make sure that it's doing the right thing. But yes, it's supposed to make it faster. Here is the second polling question for attendance. Make sure that you can answer the 3 polling questions, or 4 polling questions. I'm not sure how many Colin has today. We'll keep it all in all secret. So the way we work our particular data sets is that we have a Boolean and condition. And that's what I want to present right now. So over here we have the word steal, and we have SIC code 3441. So over here we have steal, and then if I were to put in another, oh, I told you that I was having problems here with my mouse. And over here I have the SIC code 3441, and inside of here, oh, wicked, is the intersection of those 2 items. As I get the intersection of those 2 items, that's what's showing up in my panels. So let me clear all of this and say, once you see the Venn diagram, and it makes sense. So if I type in the word steal here, so I got 3441 in one circle, steal in another circle, and I press search. Now all of a sudden I get just the intersection of those 2. Keep in mind, you're dealing with a Boolean and condition when you search our databases. You can also come over here to the detailed area. And so a lot of times if people are looking for a size of a company, you could put in sales over here in terms of, here's 2.5 million to 3.5 million of sales. I can also search by geographic region. If I put in items in more of that, then I'm going to get the Boolean and condition. Let me come back to my standard over here. As I said, I'm not really trying to go through the ValueSource market comps data. We have other webinars for that. I just want to show you that we have tools out here to help you drill down faster. So I have a question here from an anonymous attendee. It says, where does one look for support for professional practice sales, such as a general dental practice? There are a lot of dental practices inside of the market comps data. So anyway, I'll just drop it there and say that's kind of outside of my purview right now. Feel free to email me. I'll be happy to tell you all about it later on. So what I want to do is I want to say, let me search 3441, and that comes up with all of these items here. If I want to see what's behind here, I can look into the details and I can see what the details are. What happens next is that we need to drop this into an Excel sheet. So we're going from a big, here's everything inside of the database. Now we've cut it down to a smaller data set. And inside of the Excel download, and when I click on the green X, I will get a download. I will get these analyzer tools. The analyzer tools have all of the data inside of here, and I can look at those different pieces. Now, our analyzer tools have EBA code on the back. These are macros. You need to enable the macros. And so when you select your transactions over here, the macro goes in, and it says, yeah, give me a second. So when I select my transactions over here, if I say, I don't want to use this particular transaction, okay, I take out my outliers, and then the macros will actually search and come up with my selections. And then what the tool does is it generates a couple of things. One is it's going to say, okay, here is my statistics table. I'm a grid guy. And so if I look at all of this, I can say, here's the grid for all the transactions. And here's the grid for just the selected transactions. And I can say my mean is 0.71. Oh, sorry about that. I'm still learning how to use this new mouse. You got to click to make it stop scrolling. 0.71 is the mean. The median is 0.58. They're pretty close together. So maybe I'm going to be okay. And then what I like is that we draw these nice graphs. And as we look at these graphs, you can get an idea that these scatter plots here, this here is the upper, that's the 90th percentile. This here is the 10th percentile. These here are really, really, really outliers. You know, this here is the 75th percent and the 25th percent, said that backwards. You know, and so if you have a transaction that's inside of those, you're probably dealing in the mid part of the, you know, half of the transaction should occur in that realm. So I should look at that and be okay. We also have a regression line, and it draws that regression line automatically, tells you the R-squared automatically. Again, you can build your own VBA tools that do the same thing. If we come up here and, okay, clear all the drawings, click on my mouse, and come over here and say, you can get down the data only package. And the data only is just, here's a list, you know, so as I base myself off of this list, what kind of models do I want to create? Do I want to create a box plot with the whiskers on it? Do I want to create my own regression analysis? Do I want to create a complete statistical analysis? Do I have a large enough population here to create a statistical analysis? Those are all the decisions you get to make, but you can create your own VBA code where you just say, look, I copy this page into my workbook, and the workbook automatically calculates it when I say to. That's what I'm getting after. How do you automate your practice by using these particular tools? Now I want to spend a couple minutes talking about the software. And so the software over here has a spreadsheet, and all we do with this is we wrap code around Microsoft Office to make it easier to use than Microsoft Office by Excel. And I would suggest that you look at the same sorts of things. If you don't want to build this, if you don't want to spend the time to build this, if you don't want to hire a guru to write the code for you, I've talked to one practitioner who spent over $500,000 trying to put his spreadsheet into code. And so, you know, like I say, you can spend a lot of money doing that. Build by, you know, that's the question. And so in this case here, what we do is that we show different pieces. Here is our, if I try to type over the word ownership, it protects it. If I have my input cells over here, and let's say I put in my, you know, my ownership package, however you like to display ownership is cool. You know what I mean? Just put it in here. The other thing I will say is that if you don't like our presentation and you don't like our sheets, we'll build your own, you know, and then you get the same types of advantages of automation. So if I create a sheet here underneath ownership, you know, I can type in whatever I want, new sheet, give me the number of rows, you know, 25, the number of columns, let's say 50, and I can go out there and build my own sheet. Now it puts this in here. I can also show you how to customize this sheet to put in as many of these as you want. And so I have a lot of clients out there, a lot of customers who say, Dave, I want to handle compensation on my own 5 sheets. I say, no problem. Let me show you how we built the spreadsheet so you can put this into place. And we've put their 5 items in there. A lot of it has to do with depreciation, working capital, compensation, and you can do that. If you're doing just 1 or 2, I suggest this. Now here's, I need to say one more thing. I also have one client out there who says, I don't like your stuff at all. And all he's done is taken our framework and built his own spreadsheet. We require 3 underlying spreadsheets, 3 worksheet tabs, and everything else can be your own. However you want to do that, go for it. And that's what he's done. He has, you know, 900 or 1,000 spreadsheets, and none of them look like ours. And so, you know, we can do that. So I'm trying to say, customize the stuff for your presentations. You can do that inside of ValueSource software, BVM Pro. I have a question here from Jeffrey. He says, ValueSource allows export to Excel from which you can customize, and he uses the program all the time for data analysis and not necessarily report writing. Hopefully I can change your mind on that report writing here, Jeffrey, but we'll see. Again, I totally agree with you. We have 2 or 3 ways to go out to Excel and do things. And I'm just trying to say that one of the items that we do in here is we automate things, we customize things. And one of the things I like to show folks is that if you input an income statement, yes, you have to use our format here. We have some anchor accounts, but if you input an account, what you also get are the common size financial statements. And so I come down here and I say, okay, here's my historic income statement. And I get a common size financial statement just by inputting the other financial statement. You can do this in your own spreadsheets. We all have done it. You know what I mean? And as you move forward with all of that, a lot of that automation occurs automatically. And so you can make that happen. Another place where I show automation is inside of the workflows. So we have these items called, and like I say, I'm not trying to demonstrate this. I'm just trying to give you an idea. How can I automate my sheets? What has ValueSource done to automate their sheets? And inside of here, we have all of these assumptions that you make. You know, hey, am I going to use WAC or not? Am I typically using, you know, the Duff and Phelps CRISP data? Well, maybe I should check more that. But you know, if I want to use the risk premium report, I use that. Do I want to capitalize against year 0 or year 1? And as you change those items, what happens is that our product changes. So let me come down here to the benefit stream and say, this is what our benefit stream looks like with just an after-tax cash flow. You know, our taxes are figured out down here, and here's what the after-tax cash flow. Let me come back to my assumptions and say, well, what happens if I want to deal with a weighted average cost of capital? I check mark that box. I come back to the benefit stream and it automatically adjusts for the interest expense. Now, I think that's pretty cool. You know what I mean? I can look at different benefit streams. I can see which ones make the most sense. As I'm measuring the cash flows to this business, what happens to the cash flows based off of different levels of you know, how I want to see it. Trish out here is asking, can you see the underlying formulas? And the answer is absolutely. They're a little complicated, okay? We handle a lot of different cases inside of our spreadsheet because there's a lot of different practitioners that do things in a lot of different ways. My favorite example is do I have the years going 14, 15, 16 across the page, or do I have it going 17, 16, 15 down the page? And as you start to go down the page, you know, we can argue about which one's better or which one's not better. But this is the underlying formula. So this here particular cell is saying, let me go out here and based off of whether I'm going left or right, right or left, and whether I'm using, you know, an interest-free, whether I need to take interest and add it back to the benefit stream based off of what working benefit stream I'm looking at, earnings, pre-tax earnings, EBITDA, cash flows. It changes all of those numbers inside of there. And yes, you can see the formulas. You just hit that edit in native Excel. This also allows you to overwrite the formulas. So let's say you don't agree with everything. You have a special case, special circumstance, and you want to say, I need this to say this. You just go out here to Excel and make it say that. It's not a problem. So the answer is yes. Thank you for that question. And so I just didn't get to the last part here, but the last part is when I go analysis, save as, I can create my own template. And so whatever I've put in here, let's say that I've input my own, model. I put an H model, for instance. We don't have an H model inside of here. Or let's say that the 3 DCF models inside of the program are not the one you would like to use. You want to use one that's more based off of, here, let me show the revenue growth, but let me show line item increases for each of the operating expenses. Yourself into that place, you just create a template out here and you go save. And the next time I create a brand new project, my template will come up in that state of saying, here's my 0 state. In other words, I don't have any information in here from a previous engagement. I just have a blank template. And I only have default entries in here where it makes sense to have default entries. And so you can create your own templates. Do the same thing inside of Microsoft Excel. Create your own template. I mean, just that little bit of quality control would be amazing. You do have the problem though, is how do you manage your templates? And that's regardless of software or not. Let me show you the report writer. I believe that reports are very personal. This here is the way you practice, your name goes on them, how they look and feel is very important. And we have reports inside of here. If you're brand new to the business, you can start with those and you can say, how do I expand them? And certainly, but at some point, what I would suggest is that you just load up your own report. So what I've done is I've gone out to the internet and I found a Microsoft document. And this document, the reason I chose it is because it has a little bit of everything inside of it. And I believe it came from Iowa. I'm not sure if it came from I'm not sure if it came from a governmental entity or a college entity or something, but look, we have a table inside of here. As we scroll down, I have, you know, a title page. As I scroll down, I have a table of contents. I have comments out here. My point is that this here is Microsoft Word. And whatever you do inside of Microsoft Word, we can deal with inside of our report writer. Our functionality is copying and pasting items from Excel over into Word. And as we paste those items, when they change inside of your working papers, they'll change inside of the report. And that's what we really do with our templates. And so how do I do this? I bring up my own, that's a bad place for this. So let me find a good place towards the top, and I will show you how I would, inside of this cell of this table, I come over here to my Excel sheet, and I will copy that link, and that link can be a range of cells if I want to put a schedule inside of my report, or it can be a single cell if I'm discussing a particular number. So I click on my copy, then I go back to the report, and when in the report, I hit paste. And now I've created a link between that Excel file and this report. You do not have to have our software. What do I want to say? You don't have to use our ValueSource analysis file to use our report writer. You can use your own spreadsheets and your own reports and just use this copy and paste function. Can you use this copy and paste function inside of Microsoft Office by itself? And the answer is yes. It's called OLE, object linking and embedding. You have issues with how many links you do. You have issues with where your files are at. You have to be a little more sophisticated to do it. But I recommend that if you're templating your particular practice, that you look at that and say, how do I get these items inside of here? As this number changes, you know, so if I want to look at this and say, let me go back and say this number here changes, and of course it's going to be a locked up cell. So let me come out here to Excel and say, I don't like that 179. I'm going to change it to something else. Zoom takes up a lot of resources, so it takes a moment or two. So let me overwrite this formula. Let me change it to 222, just to be, you know, say, is it really going to change? I hit enter on that. I come back into my framework. And then when I go over to the report, I simply press update my links. And as I update my links, that information gets changed inside of the report. And you can see it now says 222. As I said, that could be a single link or that could be a schedule, doesn't matter. What I'm trying to show here very quickly in a matter of minutes, you know what I mean, is the idea that you can create your own template from your own report. You don't have to use our reports. You get to have your signature, your presentations. What I'm trying to show you is that you get to speed up and automate your process, but because you're copying from Excel over into Word. You can copy those links as single cells. You can copy those links as, and here is the third attendance check. You know, make sure you put that out there and do your third polling question for continuing education. I guess Colin says, you know, in about 200 days, you might see a certificate. Just kidding, Colin. He said it's usually about 7 to 10 days, but it's extended because there are so many webinars going on right now. Give them a break. And, you know, congratulations to NACVA for putting on all of these webinars. I know I've participated in a couple of them. I've led a couple of them, and I think that they're really helpful in this time. Back to what I was saying here, you have a report, can be your own report. You get the functionality of having all of that stuff inside of there, and you can increase the automation, the copying and pasting between Word and the other one. Again, depends on what practice you're in, how much automation can you use, how much automation do you not need. I'll tell you what though, if I was out there doing SBA lending, I would definitely be templating my practice, and I would definitely be doing most of the same things. And the only thing I would be changing were the specific facts and circumstances that are out there. I have a Q&A question here, and then I saw some chat messages come up. It says, Dave, a little off topic, but how do you get to color up a schedule, for example, make the header red and have it carry over to the reports? I can get no color on the analyzer schedule, but it is lost when it pulls through the report writer. The answer is that link has several characteristics involved in it. So when I click on this link, it's not necessarily going to be here. It's when it's in a schedule, and you can click on this format, same as Excel. But when you have a schedule, there's going to be another item right here that says black and white or color. And so you want to make sure that Excel comes across as in color and that your report comes across as in color. Alternatively, when you paste this item in here, you can also paste this as a word table. And that's what this is. And so if I wanted to have items up on top here, you know, I can fill up here with red. And so I come over here and say, let me fill with red. And those items up there will be filled in red. And like I said, I changed a setting on my computer so that my mouse scrolled differently, and I'm getting all kinds of fun stuff happening. So that's what's going on there. Great question, Carrie. Reach back to me. If it didn't make sense, and we can go through that. Somebody's asking here, does the Express version do the same things? Express is simple and direct. And so it does not have as much flexibility, but it makes the items quicker and easier to deal with. You know, so Joseph, reach back to me. I'll be happy to go through that at a bigger level on an individual basis and see if it would handle what you're looking for. And I know I had some questions out here in the chat panel too. So let me look at this. As I'm looking at the chat stuff, it looks like LOL where, gone, too late. All I see is Dave's technical report page. And Colin says, make sure you close the other things down. Yeah, welcome to technology. It's crazy stuff here. Glad we have a producer today over there, Colin, though I want to thank him a lot. I'm not seeing any more Q&A stuff here, but let me come back to the presentation. I got an awful lot of stuff open here. So let me come back, and as I start to close this down here over the next 4 or 5 minutes, I want to make sure that you have the ability to grab my email address so that you can reach back. If you need the presentation from today, I will be happy to send that to you. If you you know, want to talk about any of these things, as I said, this here was more about how do I standardize and automate my practice, and is it worthwhile to me? That's the question that I was really trying to answer today. And I think that ValueSource's BDM Pro and the KeyValueData subscriptions will be able to do a lot for you, and that those analyzer tools help you drill down to the data faster. Realize you don't have to use those analyzer tools. You can put in your own automation and your own analysis. It all depends on how you want to present stuff. But I think that automating the data part of this will make things faster for you. I also think it's more accurate. So a lot of times when we build equations, I know that when I build equations inside of Excel, I have to do you know, a couple double checks on them to make sure that they're accurate. And by having those analyzer tools do that, I mean, is the average really the average? Is the harmonic average really the harmonic average? You know, a lot of times you can be safe in that because so many people are using those analyzer tools. If there was a mistake, we would fix it right away. Obviously, we don't like to put out things with a mistake in them, and I like to think that we're pretty accurate in our testing work, but nobody's perfect. Nobody's perfect. At this point, I'm seeing one more question here. Let me see what's going on here. It says from Trish out here, do you ever have any pushback using software during litigation? Again, I've been on both sides of the fence on that one. I've had some experts look at me and say, how can you call this your work if a piece of software did it? My answer back to them in a snarky way is, well, did you use Office? Did you use Excel and Word? Then you use software. I think that quality work is quality work. And I think that software tends to offer up boundaries for us to stay inside of. And as we start to stay inside of those boundaries, but you know, I'm not saying that my experience, limited as it is, you know, and that's basically that I've talked to litigators. I've never been in a courtroom. Is that lawyers will do anything to discredit you. And so if they think they can discredit you because you use software, they're going to try to do that. If they think that you're not going to get discredited using software, then they won't go there. Daryl Durrell wrote an interesting article. I believe it came out in Jim Hitchner's publication. And he basically said, you know, do you use software or not? And if he was asked that question on the stand, his answer would be as he would say, of course I use software. Who in their right mind doesn't? Because if you build your own spreadsheet, you have a percentage chance of being wrong on that spreadsheet. And then he would go through a litany of cases, not necessarily court cases, but a litany of examples of saying, here's where somebody made a mistake in a spreadsheet and was wrong and gave the wrong answer. Software helps prevent that. And so of course I'm going to use software. There's a couple of other ways that he can do it. And, but I recommend that article. Reach back to me at the email address and I'll be happy to send that to you. And so, yes, people want to push back on it. They want to destroy your credibility, and there are ways to turn that question around to say, of course, I use software. A couple more comments out here in the chat box. Let me look real quick. Let's see. They all have to do with continuing education. I want to say thank you very much for attending this afternoon. Hopefully you learned a little bit. Is that the right way? Hopefully you gained something from this session and you didn't waste your hour. One of my favorite quotes these days is, you know, be careful what you spend today doing because you've spent a day of your life doing it. Make sure it was worth it. Kind of summarized that and mangled it, but you know, I hope you spent this hour and it was worth the hour, even if you get the continuing education, but above and beyond that, you're asking yourself questions. Am I going to be able to do this at a higher level? Will automating things work for me? Are there ways to automate? And the answer is the easiest way, you know, get our software, get our databases. Beyond that, are there ways you can do that in-house through VBA code? Is there a way you can hire an expert to do your own, to do VBA code that you wanted to accomplish? And you can ask yourself those kinds of questions. Colin, at this point here, I want to say thanks and turn this back over to you.
Thank you, Dave, for doing that. We appreciate everyone attending today, and we hope you have a great day. Be patient with us as the CPE will not be available for, I would give it at least 2 weeks if it were me, before you start even checking. But anyway, thank you, everybody. Have a great day.